speakers. As Carl said, we're going to go through a fair bit of stuff in about 30 minutes, so please bear with us and I'll try and cover as much detail as we can within that time frame. So let's get started. So we're going to have a quick introduction, a quick look at ingredients for success, including the migration methodology. We'll have a brief description of Transformation Manager, and then we'll get on to the demonstration. And as Carl was saying, the demonstration will be in 3 parts. We'll take some information from teapot zone files into Finder. We'll move that from Finder to PPDM 3.8. And finally from PPDM 3.8 to XML in the form of KML. Okay, so as we know, data migration is still a risky business. According to Raw Research 2011, there's still a 30% failure rate and 38 failing to reach their targets for one reason or another. And the reasons for failure include things such as the quality of the data that actually gets moved through. Sometimes it's the quality of solution that's provided. So if that's hand coding, has it been tested enough? Are the connectors to databases and things, are they pulling the right kind of information out and writing the right information in? And of course, as we know, the EMP data has particular complexities of its own as well. So that adds another level of complexity to the whole thing. So ingredients for success. As we were saying, you probably want a structured kind of methodology in terms of how you're going to move that data, and that covers all walks of life. That you need the kind of methodology as to how you're going to move the data across. You also want to leverage tools where possible. Also the use of standards. Some standards are starting to build up in the industry and also in the wider world in terms of data quality and things like that, ISO standards that are coming out. We want to ensure that you've got the right kind of experienced people in the team that's migrating the data, and we want to minimize the impact on the business. So for this talk today, we're just going to look at the first 2, and let's start off with the migration methodology. So the methodology, as you can see, we split it into 6 stages, and we'll just cover each one in a little bit more detail. So firstly, we'll start off with the project scoping. So from ETL's point of view, what we do is we can start right at that project scoping side, and we can come in and provide the service that starts at the scoping and flows right the way through to the legacy decommissioning. And for a scoping exercise, what we're looking at doing is seeing, what is the scope of the project. And one of the key things to look at within the scoping is the kind of people that will be involved in that project. So what kind of domain expertise do you need? What systems are we actually going to be migrating to and from? And to ensure that not only are those people available, but they buy into the migration at an early stage. And getting buy-in and a good group together is key to getting a good migration and a good final end result. Requirements analysis is the next stage. So again, this is pretty much like many requirements analysis you'll see in many methodologies. So again, it's all about maintaining that traceability throughout the migration process. Moving on, we get to landscape analysis. So this is more where we're looking at it from a data migration point of view. So for ETL, what we do is we separate it into 2 steps. Firstly, we have the data discovery, and we look at this from a business level, from the system level, and we look for any gaps in that. So we're looking at, what is that landscape that's out there in the environment? What are people actually using? And what do some people think they're using? They can be 2 completely different things. Alongside that, what we're doing is modeling this data. So we're going to model any source systems, so whether they're physical databases, whether they're some spreadsheet that some people use just to enhance their information in order to generate certain reports. And we'll do that for the source, we'll do it for the target. And we'll also do it for any reference systems. So anything that's being referred to either on the source or the target side, then we'll also model those things out. So carrying on to the next step, we have data assurance. So this is all about making sure that the data is fit for purpose. Again, we split this into two stages. So we have the data review and the data cleansing. So firstly, the data review is, well, we can see there we have profiling as the first kind of step. And although we can see on the left-hand side that our migration process is displayed in a kind of waterfall model, in actual fact, it's far more agile than that. So as we're doing the landscape analysis, as we're finding out what these source models and source and target models are, then we'll be wanting to profile those as soon as possible. and get the information about the quality of the data out and to the business as soon as we can. And by doing that, we start to inform people as to, where we are and the task ahead of us at an early stage within the migration. Following on from that, evidently we have the data quality. So it's all about defining data quality rules at the various levels that they need to be defined. And again, from that, we can go on and look at the retirement plan. So at an early stage, you want to be thinking about retirement plans. And not only does this serve as a very good starting point for the legacy decommissioning at the end of the project, if we're going to, be decommissioning hardware and also some of the data, then it also helps to inform people, that these systems are actually going to be switched off and help them to buy in to the changes that are coming ahead. So the data cleansing, evidently that does include the cleansing. So this can be manual cleansing, it can be automated cleansing, and very often that's a fine line there. It's whether it can be defined within rules and therefore processed that way, or whether it needs just highlighting by the automated software and returning and being cleansed manually and refed in. Also verification and data impact. So the data impact, how are systems, both upstream and downstream, that are using this data going to be affected? If we're cleansing the data, and within the data we may have a number of fields that are set to null, we may feel that for the new system that we're moving it to, that these values should not be null and should actually have a set value. Now, if other systems are relying on that null, by fact of they've written it around what they're actually receiving as data currently, then this is going to have an impact on the downstream system. So we need to ensure that we're covering this side of it as well. The last thing we want to do is migrate the data and then see that we've had a ripple effect on other systems within the business and cause those to fail instead. Next, we move on to core migration. So as we can see here, what we're going to do is split it into 4 stages. So firstly, we have configuration. Now, we have this at the technical, environmental, and documentation levels. And although I've got it here in the core migration phase, evidently for ETL providing the service of data migration, then we're always covering the core migration bit, hence the configuration at that stage. Evidently, if we come in higher up in the steps that we carry out, then the configuration will be carried out at the earliest possible point. So even pre-project scoping, where we're looking at putting these into place. Next, we have the migration itself, so design, development, and the same for the testing. So we put these on a par. There's no difference really for us between the migration and the testing. We will ensure that there's equal priority on the testing itself. And that's not only just to test, what we're developing at the moment, but depending on the length of the project, then you need to ensure you've got regression tests in place for any changes that go on. Usually as migrations go on, designs may change for one reason or another, whether that's new source data coming in from another outlet, whether that be another Excel file or a changed Excel file. Then things may change. It may require changes in the way the business rules are defined for the migration, and therefore we need to have a good set of tests in place. Finally, we have the go live, so we have the execution and review. This may also include some sorry, I hear something in the background there, but yeah, this will also include some dry runs. So you may have 1 or 2 dry runs prior to the execution to ensure that the execution proceeds without any problems. And finally, we get to the legacy decommissioning. So this is where, as we said earlier, we can use that system retirement plan as a good driver to ensuring that we can decommission the hardware and the information, and or store that information that we may need for various purposes afterwards. So looking at this from a Finder's PPDM 3.8 viewpoint, then we may start out with the Finder database and some additional files, whether they be Excel or whatever. We may look at putting all those pieces of information into a central staging, depending on the qualities and things. And this will allow us to verify, validate, and cleanse. And that not only at the kind of individual item level, like the Finder level or the Excel level, but to be able to cross-reference, because often there are a number of cross-references between the systems, and we need to ensure that these are also correct. From this, evidently, we can generate out some reports, as we were saying, for the kind of manual cleansing, if we need to do any of that, or even to report out automated cleansing. So a number of various reports can be generated. Once we're happy with the quality of the data that we have, then we can evidently migrate that through to PPDM 3.8 and have the logging in at that point as well to log what information has been migrated. So secondly, on our ingredients list we're going to look at was the tools. So for all the data movement and migration, we use Transformation Manager, which is an ETL solutions tool. It's been around for over 15 years now and has been used in many migrations over that time, and has been used by many people. Also, our consultants are fully trained in this tool, and with it being an in-house tool, we can react quickly to any additions or changes we need to make. So if we need to create some new adapters for things, then we can do this very quickly, and we're quite reactive in terms of timescales to produce new adapters. And this helps us when we're looking at Finder PPDM. Evidently, with PPDM 1700 highly constrained tables, we need to be able to ensure that we're keeping that referential integrity. And with TM, it helps us in terms of we don't have to set the foreign keys, so it'll set those for us. It inserts the data evidently in a way that's not going to violate any of those keys. So we don't have to worry about building layers in terms of how we're going to insert the data into PPDM. We can structure it more around the data structure than we can around the physical constraints and finding the only way that they'll actually go in. It also allows us to have call-outs to applications and systems, for instance, the units of measure or coordinate reference systems, and we have a range of functions and procedures that allow for the use of migration logic. Okay, in summary, ETL provide a range of services right from the scoping straight through to the system retirement. So we cover the full range in the data migration lifecycle. And we combine the expertise of tools and methodology. And that's kind of key really in terms of looking at some of those ingredients we looked at earlier, in terms of putting together, a group and the competency to be able to carry out the migration. And also we offer licenses and guidance for in-house use of TM, so even without the service side of things, then the product itself is still out there and being used by various companies for carrying out data migrations. So the demonstration itself, I'm just going to take a minute or two just to cover what we're going to go through in the migration. So we're going to take data from teapot dome files, as we were saying, and thanks to RMOTC and the US Department of Energy for providing that data for us. And that will be in terms of a couple of Excel sheets and last file. We're then going to move that into Finder, which will be an Oracle database. From there, we'll move it to a Oracle PPDM 3.8 database. And finally, we'll move that data out into XML in the form of KML, and we'll just display that for sake of ease in Google Earth. So having a look at the Finder to PPDM information we're going to migrate. We're going to move some well header information. We're going to move some directional survey information. And we're going to move some well log data information. And for the purpose of this, within the 30 minutes, we're going to focus in on the well log data. As you can see, on the source Finder side, we're moving from 3 tables. And we'll be migrating to 5 tables on the PPDM target side. Finally, just a note on the deployment. So with TM, it's a very lightweight deployment that we provide, so it can be deployed using deployment packs, either ad hoc, as you wish, or they can be scheduled in something like Windows Schedule or any other scheduling system that you want to schedule them in. It can also be nested into any Java code you have, so if you've got any existing Java code, it can be nested into there. And we can generate Java code as well, for instance, to nest it into the message queues of web services. So we can provide the full deployment system for you and allow you to plug that into your own architecture as you wish. And again, we've done this for a number of clients, for instance, with web services, where they have their architecture defined, and we just have our hooks to plug in to the various sites and they can then just slot the full components into their own architecture. Okay, so let's get on and have a look at the data migration itself. So if you have a look at TM, we can see here...
Sorry, Chris, can I just interrupt? There's been a couple of questions. If that's all right, I can just quickly ask them before you jump into that itself. One question was, do you cover production data or other domains, or is it just wells? Can you use TM, for example, or do we do more than just wells? So I guess I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I mean, for TM we cover all areas, I guess. So I mean, there's no limit. This demonstration today is going to focus in on the wells area. So that's the bit you'll see in the demonstration, but we're not limited to that area in any way, shape or form. It can be used to migrate whichever particular area of interest that you're intending to migrate.
Okay. And another question was, when your data is all over the place, and this is particularly relevant that we've seen in data migrations, for example, some in data stores and some in applications, etc. Can you give examples of tools or processes that allow you to find the data?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, if you're looking at finding the data, you're probably looking at, in terms of, putting it into a staging database or something. Is that what it's referring to there? So, I mean,
I think it's more along the data. I assume it's more along the lines of the data discovery, the landscape analysis. So it's kind of understanding all those interconnectivities, and I guess that is an area where it isn't necessarily something that we provide in our tool, but we've used other technologies to assist in that. So
yeah, I mean, I tend to go for the, once you've analysed the landscape and understood what areas you're going to be covering, what systems you're going to be hitting, whether they are files or databases, then, if you can bring them together and form them into some staging area, then that enables you far greater chance of being able to check the referential integrity between those different models. And that's certainly something you need to do before you look at doing the migration itself.
Okay. I've got a couple more, but do you want to dive on and we'll cover some more as you go? Sorry.
Yep. We'll move on, as I think we're rapidly getting to our time limit for this.
Yeah,
so,
I'm conscious of that.
What we'll do, this is the main view of Transformation Manager in terms of migrating the data. So as we can see here, we've got 5 projects. So as I was saying, we're going to bring 2 Excel files in and a last file from Teapot Dome. We're then going to move it from Finder to PPDM and finally PPDM to KML. So in the interest of time, we'll just have a quick look through at some of these projects. So you can see here that a project has some models, it has some transforms, and it can have error handlers as well. If we look at the window below, we can see some of the models we can use. You can load these models in once, and they're available for any project that you want to use them in. Below that, we can see the procedures, and these procedures allow us to reuse the SML. So as we're writing our business logic, we can write it once and reuse it time again. So let's have a look at one of the maps. So if I have a look at this one here, where we're taking a spreadsheet and we're migrating it to, so in this case we're moving it from the spreadsheet and we're moving it to the Finder database. So in the bottom window here, you can see we have the Finder, the full database. In the top window here, we have a particular element that we're looking to migrate data to. And the same on the source side, we have the sheet 1 from the Excel sheet. And at the top here, we have the particular element, which again is sheet 1, that we're going to move the data from. And we can look at this in it just to see how it looks. So this is the actual Excel file containing the wellheader data. So you can see each row, we have the API number, we have a well number, we have some northing and easting coordinates for it, and some various other data about it. We can see that the coordinates are in Wyoming East Central State Plain. So that's one thing to take into account. If we have a look at the second file we're going to move in while we're here looking in the Excel, we can see this is a different structured file. So you can see here we have the well and the API number, so it's listed vertically, and then we have the data about it here also listed vertically. As we go down, we can see the second well below it. So it's a slightly different structure in terms of the Excel files we're going to be loading in. Finally, the last file we're going to load in is, again, a structured file. So you can see we have the well information, curve information, parameters, and then finally, if we go down, we get to the actual data that we're going to be loading in. And so again, you can see a structured file that we're going to take and load that into Finder. So if we have a look, so as I was saying, in the center pane is where we define our logic. It is text-based. It gives you one level of complexity, if you like. There's no lines and boxes. What you see is what you get and what will happen when you do the data migration. So as we can see, we've got some rules defined here. In terms of TM, the way we do things, we do it quite object-oriented in some ways, if you like. In terms of, at this point, we're just moving data from sheet 1 to well header. Evidently, a well header, you can see, has a number of attributes. It has some foreign keys that are denoted by the little green square. You can see another foreign key there. As we go down, we'll see some mandatory elements there, attributes denoted by the solid box. And we can see the orange square there defining the primary key. It also brings in all the relationships and inverse relationships. And one of them is the nodes that are related to the well header. Certainly when we're populating the well header, we want to populate the node that's related to populate some longitude and latitude. Within TM, we can do that just by simply cascading to it. And we can see that here now. We've stayed at the sheet 1 on the source side, and we've gone nodes on the target. Again, we define some logic. You can see here that in this case, I've written a simple Java project. And all this was with a Java method. It just called out to a Java jar called GeoTools, and this just allowed me to pass in the values for the Wyoming state plane, and also for the WTS-84 to represent it in Google Earth, and then passing the easting and northing for those. And from that, I could set the latitude and longitude and pass that into the nodes element within the Finder database. And again, all this is available, so it's all space completion. So you can see you can insert your patterns for coding patterns, things like that. You can see we have a number of procedures all available. You can see where I've called out to a Java method. Evidently, TM by default doesn't have a particular function to convert the coordinates from the Wyoming state plane over. So in this case, we've just called out and written a Java method to do that. And here you can see a vast array of invoke functions that are already available within TM. And these cover things such as performance, including batching on databases and things like that, as well as your common string manipulation kind of functions that are available. And again, if we want any of these, then we can just return, and I will put that into the mapping. So it's very quick and easy to start to build up your mappings. And again, if you want to start creating some, you can just drag and drop between two attributes, and it will write that line into your map for you. Once you define your mapping, what you can do then is you can build the map. So if we right-click, you can build it. This will actually build it, and it creates it here. So we can see that field code is coming from a optional field item. So all the source data is optional, as it's coming from an Excel sheet. So it's just warning us that that may be an issue as we're populating mandatory items for it. We'll accept those for now, and we'll launch the migrator. We can see we'll define our source, which is a file, and our target database. We'll hit run. And that's that loaded into the data. We can see a few stats there about how it was loaded in. For the sake of time, what I'm going to do is I shall just load these in. So we'll build up the directional survey. And again, we'll just launch the migrator for this. You can see again, it's just going file into the database. So we'll just hit run. You can see here we've started putting some warnings out for information that's not available. So when we loaded the well headers in, what we decided as one of our logic rules was if there was no well header, then we wouldn't load the directional survey. So in this case, we just quite crudely output to the screen here that, no well was found for a particular API number while we're loading those directional surveys. So again, we can start to put business logic and build it up in that kind of form. Finally, for the last one, as we were saying on deployment options, there are a number of options here. I could take you through one of the deployment options that we have. So if we go to the deployment, we can simply open a command window and we can call run transform, and then we can call the as defined transformation pack, which you can see there. And this will run, and this again, exactly the same as using the migrator, loads that data into our Finder database. So you have a number of options in terms of the way you load the data in. Once we've got the data into Finder, we can have a look now at the Finder to PPDM mappings. So if I open up the Finder to PPDM, and I'll also open up the cascade hierarchy, and hopefully this will start to show you the way that PM builds up the migration process and how we start to structure the way that we migrate the data between these two databases. So again, you can see a lot of it's one-to-one migration. So we're taking well header information and we're passing it into the well. Again, you can see on the source here we're taking information from the nodes, the longitude and latitude, and we're going to populate it into the well service latitude and longitude. We then go down, we have a look at the cascades, so we're evidently going to cascade down. One of the things we were going to look at was the logs. So here you can see that we have the well log and the well log run header. So if we look at the cascade at this point, we can start to follow it down, and we can see how we built the transformations to follow it down the natural data structure that's defined within PPDM. So you can see we start at the header, and again I can just navigate. I can either right click and navigate if I want, and I can see the mappings you see here. Now we've moved to the log run header to the well log job. We're moving some information across the cascade in our map to trip. So again I could right click and navigate that. So at this point now we're down to the well log curve header. We're moving that information across to the trip. And we can see the next one. So if we navigate down through there, we can see we're still at the well log curve header on the source side, but we've gone down. We want to populate more stuff from the well log curve header into the well log path. So again, we can populate information across at this point. We can follow the cascade down again to the trace list, the well log curve, and finally, if we navigate once more, we get down to the well log data points going across to the well log curve values. So again, we can see that we followed that down. The structure is following the structure of the PPDM model, and it's maintaining the structure within the Finder database. So we're following both sides down at the rate they're happy to go at and moving that data as we need to. So it's taking data from kind of one table, putting it into two, or taking it from 2 or 3 tables and putting it into one. So that kind of thing is very easy within the cascade structure in Transformation Manager. One thing you'll see is a set common attributes. This is used for, evidently within PPDM, each element has a number of common attributes. Rather than map them every single time around, we have a procedure to do it. And again, you can see things like row changed, row created. Then rather than actually set these each time, we can write this transform once, and we can then reuse it time and again. For PM, it comes with a model PM 3.8, which includes some additional tables, such as these for the common calls. And this allows us to enable this reuse within it. A couple of other points just to touch on. Evidently, when you're migrating data, you might want to update the models. This can be done very quickly using our change model. You load your new model in, select it, and swap the models over. It will then report any issues that we have within that. So finally, once you're happy with your business logic at that point, then again we can build it. And this is, the iterative process that we'll go through when we're building and developing these processes and migrations. Then we make it a very iterative kind of process. So we'll define some mappings, and we'll get that data pushed through to some sample database so that the business domain experts can have a look and check that that data is going through how they expect it to go through. Once we've built it, we can see again we've got some warnings about length, but we'll accept those for now. We can launch the migrator. We can see at this point it's database to database. We can hit run, and this will run what's happened in the background. When we built it, we created a Java jar file, and that single jar file is now being executed, and we can see the results of that now, and that tells us the information that we passed through into the various tables in PPDM. So that is the migration done. That's pushed the data through to PPDM. We can have a look at that if we want, and again, we could do this if there's data in there before we map. We could do it. We could also look at the finder data. But just for example's sake, we'll have a quick look at the PPDM information. So we can connect that to a database, and we could have a look at, let's have a look, maybe, let's say a survey station, and we can view the data. So there's the survey station data that we loaded in from the Excel file. We can also navigate this. So this is a really nice idea, is that you can actually navigate to a directional survey. So we can see the precise survey that that came from, and I can navigate back up to the well. Again, this is the list of relationships related to it. And I can have a look at that particular well that that survey station came from. And again, you know, we can drag these windows around so we can keep hold of them while we're doing our mapping, so actual data that we will be moving and migrating through. Once we've got to that point, the final step, I know we're running out of time, is for PPDM to KML. So again, in the sake of time, I shall build it and run it. Again, we've got some warnings.
Just while you're running that, Chris.
We'll hit run to run it. Yep.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions, so I guess while you're just, if you want, just carry on going if you're able to, and just keep opening that up. I don't know if you need to have a voiceover as well, but I've got a few questions to ask, if that's all right.
Yeah, if you hold on 2 seconds, we'll get through
the
reverse bit, and we'll be at the end of this part of the demonstration anyway. So we can see we've generated the file to Google Earth. I can quickly open it up, and you can see there we have it. So 1538 today that we've generated it. We click open it to Wyoming. Okay. And as we go in, and this just gives you of the information that we've started off in our Excel and LUD files. So if we click on those, we can see a bit of information about it. And although simplicity we've loaded it into Google Earth, evidently you can write your extract to extract data from things such as PPDM and import them into any other tools that you want to. But just for the fact of this demo, then we've just loaded it into Google Earth. So that pretty much concludes it. There's a couple of things I just wanted to touch on in terms of our projects and the way we carry out the project, which was, if I can find it, when we're looking at projects, we kind of have our review dashboard, and this helps us in terms of keeping track of where we are through a migration. So again, if I have a look at this, we can have a look at, say, something like data assurance. We can see there one of the points is retirement plan, so we could have a look at these, so we can have information we're looking for when we're looking at retirement plans, and we can have a look at the questions we might be asking ourselves. And again, if we go in and review other people's migrations, these are the kind of questions we'd be asking them. And again, if we have a look, say, for our documentation side of things, here is one of our system retirement plans in template form. So again, if we just scroll down perhaps to the kind of table of contents, it starts to show you the kind of information that we have, the kind of structures that we have already in place. So in terms of our document, we have our template ready to go, evidently built up over the years from the various migrations we've done. We've fine-tuned and refined those templates in terms of getting a process together that works well for data migrations. I think that covers pretty much what I was going to cover. So, Carl, I'll come back to you now. Sorry about that earlier, but that covers the migration. And any questions that we have at this point, we can now take some time and go through in detail.
Okay. One of the questions that came in earlier was how do you share or capture the mappings?
Yep. In terms of capturing the mappings, what we do, again, when we build the project, it automatically generates documentation. So if I go down, there we go. So we have find its PPDM. We can open it up. We can see we've already had a look at some of these. So again, you can have a look, the transform text, and get carried out. And you can have a look at that call hierarchy. So as we were saying, those cascades that we created, again, you can navigate these within your XSC with the mappings that you've defined, all the target attributes and the source attributes that they come from. So hopefully that addresses that side of the question.
There was a question about reuse of SQL or Java functions that an in-house team have built.
Yeah. Again, from TM, as we saw with one of the methods we imported earlier for doing the coordinate conversions, then you can evidently reuse your own Java methods and SQL if you want by calling out to the Java method. So I think in one of these, somewhere here, we had a look. So here we called out to the method that I'd written called convert X to long, and evidently my method took some parameters, so I could just call that method and pass in those parameters and use that directly in the map, and at runtime that's being called live to go off and do the calculation, in this case using the free Java from GeoTools. So again, by doing that, you can call out and reuse existing code or existing SQL if you wish to do that.
Yeah, because I think that leads into a similar answer in terms of there was a couple of questions on coordinate reference systems. Do we provide one ourselves, or do they link in? I guess, and that's exactly it. We don't provide a CRS of our own. Same with UON. Well, we do have a UON, but again, we can TM would leverage your existing choice in terms of the coordinate reference system or your units of measure that you want to use. In terms of capturing the mapping, I don't know if you mentioned as well, Chris, but there's also populating the PPDM mapping tables as well. I don't know if you covered that story.
Yep, no, it's very true. It can be we can populate the PPDM mapping tables.
Yeah, and obviously TM generates HTML documentation so that you capture error-free and automatically the mappings that you're constructing and the models that you're working with as well. Had a question on Finder stores log curves as endlist files in Finder project directory, but in our demo we've stored it in well-logged data points table. The question here was, did we move the endless file into well-logged data points and then move to PPDM using TM? The question mark there. I'm pretty sure the answer is that we didn't use the endless files, but there's no reason why we couldn't. I know we've done work with, for example, dlist and LAS files. Endless, obviously, I don't know, Chris, if there was anything else you would add on that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different ways you can approach that. So, I mean, for the demo, we loaded in LAS files. We loaded in and moved the log data through the LAS files into the database and through to PPDM. But yeah, there are different ways of tackling the endless. It's certainly either through readers or APIs or something like that in terms of migrating that endless data.
Okay. Another question was kind of on the process or how you would typically use the TM-generated transforms. I think it was around this idea of testing and regression tests and things like that. I don't know if you can share any examples or experience of how you would typically sort of use TM in that kind of environment of testing before you actually press the go button.
Yeah, I think, as we covered when we were going through the slides, I mean, we put equal weighting on the kind of migration and testing side of things. So we define out the tests that we need when we're defining the business logic, and this enables, as the development goes on, if there are any changes come in, then by having that test suite there available, it means that we can make changes and have confidence that we're not having any adverse effects on any other areas of the mapping that are already defined.
Okay, I'm very conscious of the time. We've already overrun by a bit. I know people are sticking around, and we greatly appreciate that. There's a couple more questions, but I guess I don't want to hold people on the webinar and go well or further beyond the time. What we will do is we will get back to those that have asked additional questions, and we will be sharing this recording as well. Thank you very much for taking part. We hope that you've got at least a bit of an overview of the kind of technology and how we would approach a data migration. In this instance, we were using Finder to PPDM as an example. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact myself. You should have my contact details. And also just a reminder that we have a range of other webinars that we're doing. We have 3 more planned, one this Friday, and then in a couple of weeks' time we've got 2 more on the Wednesday and Friday of that week as well. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to hopefully catching up with you post-event. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.